Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Um, It's funny, it's been since the end of June or the first weekend in July since I've been here on a Sunday. And
It's not there.
Just the Peru trip.
I stand corrected.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
That's what I had in mind, but I've been here since then, I guess. Okay. All right, well, I'll take that back. But what I was going to say is I kind of feel like a loss for words, even though there's a lot of interesting things that we did that I could talk about. Um, so let's look at the past for a second. A number of people in this room, in preparation for Dao Ren, which is a group of people that have taken Jukai, that has a study group, and quarterly or so discussions, are reading a book called Circle of the Way by Barbara O'Brien. And it's the first time I've come across anyone who has looked into Buddhism from an archaeological perspective and talks about, at least in the beginning of the book, that the first at least 1,000 years of Buddhism is not necessarily, but primarily a story within the tradition of Buddhism, as opposed to something that is historically recognized or verified by an existence of information or facts. That the story of Buddhism is primarily that, the story of Buddhism. And that can, to a believer, sound threatening or offensive in some way. But I think that there's a better way to look at it. If we recognize that the story of us, however we frame the past and how we got here, is a cumulative succession of projections. Barbara O'Brien talks about how at each point in time, the story of Buddhism was these group of people recording information about their ancestors. And then these groups of people recording information about their ancestors, etc. And the story kind of compiles. And our past is kind of the same way. We have a memory, and as we grow and mature, our view and understanding of the memory changes, and thus our understanding of the past changes, our understanding of a relationship changes, and our understanding of why something happened or why we responded in the way we did changes. Thus, in a very real way, the past changes. And the past is really a function of the future. It is a function of the present. When we think about the world, we think about it in a linear way. Well, that happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and that's why I'm here now. But from an experiential level, we're here now, and from here, the past is perfectly capable of of being brought into being. So in this way, we could view the Buddha as an individual that lived a long time ago, was an extremely wise person, wiser than anybody around today, may have had supernatural abilities. And between the Buddha and now, there were a number of extraordinary practitioners, but through the centuries, they little by little become a little bit more human, a little bit less magical, a little bit less removed from what we think of as possible, until we get to the people that we actually interact with in our own lives, or even ourselves. And we see really wise, really talented people. But in our interactions, we realize firsthand that none of them are perfect. But if someone goes far back enough in history, or rather the farther back someone goes, if the more possible perfection becomes, as they're more removed. This is true with loved ones as they've passed as well, right? So that's one way we can look at things. We can reach all the way back to when there was great spiritual power. And then over time, we've approached modernity, which is a little bit more profane. Or we can see these projections a different way. And we can see that the past is a projection of the future. And what gives the Buddha, what gives the tradition power, is our own understanding and faith in what is possible. Therefore, it's not that the Buddha did something great and this tradition has been along since then, so here we are. Rather, it's that we are great. Thus, we know that the Buddha is possible, and understand what it is to be the Buddha, and validate what we understand as the things that the Buddha understood, knew, and said, because we understand them ourselves. So the other way of seeing this is we are the source of the Buddha. There is a tendency, which I assume has always existed, of thinking about how good things used to be and we've kind of lost it. I had a moment, as I was putting this microphone on, thinking about, there's evidence that our ancestors could literally speak to thousands of people without amplification. And, now, there's a room full of 20 and I can't do it. So there's that mind of, there was something they really had that we've really lost. And now, one consequence of this way of thinking, however it applies to you, and one of the reasons I'm bringing it up right now is this last summer, Shanae and I, and a number of others we were practicing with, spent time with a few different indigenous communities. One of them was down in Peru, and one of them was in Namibia. I have a few pictures, not many. I might show them. Just this last weekend, we did a ceremony in the Cheyenne tradition. And what drew me to a lot of these was a longing for what I perceived as an indigenous relationship to the earth, and also spirituality, and also family, and also values, with a kind of perception that there was a kind of wisdom that existed then that we as a society have lost. They knew how to cultivate families, but we live in a culture now of broken homes. They knew how to live in a sustainable way within their own ecosystem, and we're destroying the earth. They had a specific relationship with their water and food that was direct, and ours is removed. Now we're very rational. So if we think this way and think of kind of past, and then we've got good, bad here, and there's all these good things, and as we go to the present, it get towards bad, and then we continue the slope, like the future doesn't look so hot. So we make lots of movies about Armageddon, and we talk about really bad things that are going to happen, and we find data that corroborates it. And the real problem with all of that is it removes our true responsibility. It allows us to believe something is happening that is outside of ourselves, and we let go of this true steering wheel of our own life. This is the power of pessimism. We lose sight of the fact that the Buddha lives within us, that there is no wisdom or power or kindness or possibility that is separate from what we truly are. We think that time was something that started in the past, 14.7 billion years ago, to be exact. But we don't recognize that where we sit is the birthplace of civilization. The birthplace of the future and the birthplace of the past. Insight is emphasized in Zen, and it's a misleading word, I feel, because it's a word that has a lot of conceptual layers to it. But its intention is to really shift us from our understanding of what it is to be alive, which is something that has a beginning, a middle, and end. There are certain needs that a body has in order for it to thrive, that a heart has in order for it to thrive. This is our understanding of what a life is. To shift from that to our actual, what can't even be called an experience of being alive, because it's more intimate than that. When we really take seriously that there is anything at all. So I did a trip to Namibia just a few weeks ago somehow, and just for fun, would you show? Do you know how to show those pictures? Yeah. There's a few things that led to me going. I was checking out the Sea to Sea Trail, the Corvallis to Coast Trail, for an event that some of us did earlier this year. And halfway through the trail, I slept at Big Elk Campground and had this dream that I was, I've been a distance runner for a number of years. And I had this dream that I was running with this deep felt understanding that I had been doing it for a very long time, like, not like hours, but like lifetimes. And then I came across an article that day on the internet. I'm not an internet peruser, but I came across an article from someone I didn't know that really struck me about running. Um, I don't even remember what words struck me, but here's the opening paragraph. Running for me is about simplicity. It's about removing the unnecessary barriers between myself and the world. And so this is what Zazen is also. The unnecessary barriers between ourselves and the world. Our creative functioning is not a problem unless it is, and often it is. And often we don't even know that it is in the moment until the consequences come, until we found out what we really thought was going to happen was not what the world had in mind for us. But when we really pay attention, we find out that our generation of individuality is what inhibits our real connection to this life right here. Running for me is about simplicity. It's about removing the unnecessary barriers between myself and the world, tapping into something truer, deeper, and more human. I don't need theories or advice. I don't need gear. I don't need infrastructure or permission. So what would it be like to live that way? Not feeling hung up by the burdens of the processes that we feel we need to go through in order to achieve a desired outcome or mission. not being afraid that how we live might upset somebody. Just get out and go, move, breathe, be, and that's all there is to it. So from the outside, that kind of is all there is to it. Alan Watts would say humans are tubes that wiggle around and put stuff in one end and shoot it out the other, bump into each other every now and then. From an external perspective, moving and breathing. And of course, from the inside, it's not like that. But we really have to hold the things that we value in perspective. For example, it seems so much of our values are based around the idea that death is bad. And we don't know that. Don't know that. So the people I went with posted a whole bunch of photos on an internet thing, but I couldn't figure out how to get on it. So one of them kindly just emailed me 4 random photos an hour before I came. That's a tree. And it's a picture of the landscape. It was glistening hot, just off the sand. And it was cool being in a landscape where I got how actually people could run in the natural landscape. I'd heard all these theories about, humans being indigenous runners back when we emerged out of Africa, but then I heard that and have looked around different ecosystems that I had been in and thought, well, that sure would be difficult, given the understory and the forest here, and the jungle in Peru is so thick you can hardly even walk. But there it makes sense that people evolved running. Let's see the next one. Jacob was a young man, one of the tourists, who was a biologist, and a number of people got really excited. And apparently there was a big snake, and we all went over to see it. And Jacob says, "Oh, it's a python, non-venomous." And then he jumps on it and picks it up and throws it around his body. Go to the next picture. One joke we were making is, so in terms of growing up, the main rite of passage we observed with the children is being able to walk. And that's when you become independent. There was just a group of maybe 30 children that would run in and out of the village together, between ages 3 or 4 and 16. And whenever they would show up where we were, they would receive some food. There were a few babies that were with us, and it really struck me the whole week. They never cried. They never cried for an enduring amount of time. Like sometimes there would be a reaction that would bring some crying, but then it would stop. Let's see the next picture. He was the elder. We were persistence hunting. That's what we were doing, which is the art of chasing after a large game animal on foot until it exhausts from the heat. We were never successful. The outings in the desert would be up to 8 hours long. And it's amazing how long they could go without food or water. We all had our, running packs with us. Um, you know, they know how to recognize plants with water roots, and it was so dry. It just amazed me when someone dug up this, stick that was just sticking 18 inches out of the ground, looked dead to me, and pulled out this massive watermelon-sized soft root ball that was just drenched with water. I mean, it was like a jicama, but this big with like a texture of an old soggy cucumber, a little bit bitter, a little bit sweet. He was their elder hunter. He was 48 years old. And the animals that they're allowed to hunt are limited to a few species. And actually, while we were out on hunts, we never found any of them. And then when we crossed the border into the national park 10 miles away, where hunting is forbidden, that's where they all were. So they have some hard feelings about the regulations, and the world is complicated and everything is changing. I think that's the last picture, is that right?
That way, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, we can turn that off. It's about time. A lot of us went on that trip excited about and experiencing a culture that's known as being one of the oldest cultures on Earth. The Kalahari Desert is considered one of the places where human beings as a species just go way, 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 way back. And I think for myself and some of the participants, we were yearning for some kind of stability in coming into that culture, feeling stressed about the things that we have anxiety today about in our conversations, politics and climate change. But my primary learning, and the only point that I really want to make and express is, the birthplace of humanity isn't something that happened, and things have gone this way or that way since then, will continue in some direction. This is really the birthplace of humanity, and we have to own that. Yeah, all that I want to say tonight. Thank you.
Four great bodhisattvas we found on page 5.